All right, so we launched a single instance. Okay, great, right? But that's a single point of failure, right? And if our application is critical, right, we want to be able to tolerate outages, but we also want to be able to tolerate situations where we might get unexpected volumes of traffic. We don't want our instance to get swamped. So in order to make that happen, we want to first of all make our application highly available by having it run on more than one instance and have those instances run in multiple availability zones. And we want to load balance the requests to those instances. And then we want to configure auto-scaling that can automatically add more instances if needed, so that if we get high volumes of requests, we can scale out automatically. That's what auto-scaling is. Okay, so with auto-scaling, it's a horizontal scaling between a minimum number of instances and a maximum number of instances. We scale out when we want to launch new instances, when we have high volumes of requests. And then when those volumes of requests goes away, we can scale back in to save money. And this is important because we pay by the hour for our instances. So we should scale back in when we don't need as many instances running. So the idea behind auto-scaling is to make us more resilient for traffic spikes, but also to make sure that we're cost optimized and running the right number of instances all the time. Now, in order to set up auto-scaling, there's a couple of things you need, and I'm going to walk you through all this stuff. You need to create a launch configuration. And the launch configuration is basically just the EC2 instance attributes. You're telling the auto-scaling service, this is the type of EC2 I want to launch. This is the AMI. This is the security group, etc. Okay. User data script, if you want, all that type of stuff. Okay. That's what the launch configuration is. The next thing you need is to monitor your instance load with CloudWatch. And CloudWatch is a service from Amazon that does real-time monitoring of metrics. For example, average CPU utilization, latency at the load balancer, right? Or your own custom metrics, such as how much memory the instances are using or how many threads, right? Those are up to you. Anyway, you can have those monitored in real time in CloudWatch, and then you could create alarms when the metrics go above predefined thresholds. So for example, I could create an alarm that says if my average CPU utilization for my instances in my auto-scaling group goes above 70%, I think it's time to add another instance. Now, notice I don't say 100%, because if I get to 100%, what's going to happen? My applications aren't going to be responding to any new requests because they're saturated. So I want to add more instances before I get to that point. That's the whole purpose here. So auto-scaling is going to launch more instances before I have an issue, right? And this is going to keep me highly available. All right, and then the other thing I need is to define an auto-scaling policy. And the auto-scaling policy is basically saying, how many instances should I launch when I see an alarm from CloudWatch saying there's time to scale out or scale in? Okay. So to set up auto-scaling, this is what you do. You create a custom AMI, right? The AMI is going to be the EC2 instances AMI that's going to be launched by auto-scaling. Now, I am going to create a custom AMI from that instance that I just launched. That means it's going to contain my application on it, and it's going to have PHP, and it's going to have Apache. Now, I like that because I don't want to wait for my application to do all that stuff. I want it to get in service as quickly as possible, right? Because I want to be able to handle this high volume of requests. So I'm going to create a custom AMI, and I'm not really going to do any post-launch configuration on it. The next thing I'm going to do is create security groups, because I'm going to launch a load balancer, and I want that to have a security group. Then I'm going to launch the load balancer. Then I'm going to create the launch configuration, which describes the EC2 instance that's going to be launched by auto-scaling. Then I'm going to create the auto-scaling group. Then I'm going to set up the CloudWatch metrics and alarms to know when there's a time to scale out or scale in. And then I'm going to create the policies that says how many instances to add or take away when I'm scaling out or scaling in. Those are all the steps. Okay. Now this is the architecture that we're going to have, right? We're basically going to have our VPC, right, with our internet gateway. we're going to launch this elastic load balancer, which is going to distribute the requests to instances in two different availability zones, A and B. This is important because if we had everything in one AZ, there's a potential for an availability zone to have a failure, and none of our instances would be reachable then. If we do two AZs, which are now 20 to 40 miles apart from one another, we're very resilient, whereas if there's one AZ that goes out, we still have the instances on the other availability zone. Now, the elastic load balancer has something called health checks, and it tells if it can't reach instances, and it won't send any new requests to those bad instances. So it would actually detect that and just send the requests to the healthy instances. Okay. And then the auto-scaling group will automatically adjust the instances according to the CloudWatch alarms to make sure we have enough instance capacity running all the time, just the optimum amount. Okay, so that's going to be our architecture. Notice this is all contained in one VPC. Okay, so VPCs can span availability zones, right? But they cannot span regions. So a VPC has to belong to a particular region. I'm going to put this in North Virginia, also known as US East 1 or the standard region, right? And this is exactly what it's going to look like, and it's all going to work just like this.